Channel 8 News reporter Zaldi DeJungen is here in studio with Washburn Law professor and Kansas First News political analyst Dr. Bob Beatty. Zaldi?
Thanks, John Morgan. And Dr. Bob Beatty joins us now to discuss and provide an in-depth analysis on how the upcoming elections will affect Kansas and with what we can expect to go down at the polls. Dr. Beatty, thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here, Zaldi.
All right, so Dr. Beatty, if you can give a quick overview on what's been happening in the Senate and the governor's race.
Well, in the Kansas governor's race and in the Senate race, it's sort of ground zero for American politics. In the governor's race, really, what the voters have to decide is whether Kansas is a small c conservative state or an extremely conservative state. And we'll see Tuesday what the upshot of that is. In terms of the U.S. Senate, that's been the huge surprise. The Kansas voters have to decide whether Senator Pat Roberts has simply been in Washington too long, and independent Greg Orman is arguing that it's time for a fresh start for Kansas.
And these two races have gotten national attention because of how close they were, or they are. So we'll go with the governor's race first. If Governor Brownback doesn't win, what does that mean for Kansas?
Well, that's an excellent question. You know, Paul Davis, of course, is a Democrat, but the House and the Senate will most likely continue to be Republican. So in a long-standing Kansas tradition, Democrat Paul Davis would act as a check on the Republican legislature, and that's what, you know, a lot of people don't talk about, but he really wouldn't have a lot of power in the next 4 years. So again, you'd have that check and balance function of a Davis Democrat versus Brownback as a Republican.
All right, and heading over to the Senate race, Pat Roberts has been here for over a decade now, and so here comes Greg Orman. And that race is pretty close as well. And so if Greg Orman takes Pat Roberts' spot, how big of an impact is that on the state of Kansas?
It's absolutely massive. We can't even imagine. I mean, it's an excellent question because we don't know what Greg Orman is going to do in the U.S. Senate. I think this has the potential, if Greg Orman wins, to sort of blow up Washington, inspire other independents across the United States to think about running for offices as independents. This is simply unprecedented. Think about this. The last time a non-Republican won a U.S. Senate seat in the state of Kansas, 1932.
Wow.
So it is big.
All right. Well, these two races will definitely be fun to watch. Thank you, Dr. Beatty, for joining us today. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Zaldi. When we return, we'll talk with a representative from Kansas State, from the K-State Republican and Democratic Party.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to Channel 8 News Election Special. I'm Morgan Hulsman.
And I'm John Zetmeyer. Our Channel 8 News reporter Willie Evans is now joined by representatives from the Kansas State University Republican and Democratic Party to give us two different outlooks on the campaign. Willie?
Thank you, John and Morgan. I'm joined now by K-State College Republican Organization member Laura Myers and K-State Democratic Organization member Kyle Neal. Welcome, both of you guys.
Thank you.
Now, the Senate race in Kansas is coming down to the wire. Republican candidate Pat Roberts is running against independent Greg Orman. Now, in September, Orman was endorsed by a group of about 70 former Republican officials. So, Laura, I want to ask you, why are so many people crossing the party line, and do you think they should be?
In regards to that question, I can tell you from Governor Brownback's campaign representative talked to me about that issue, and actually those members were part of organizations that were nonpartisan, and those organizations that they were part of endorsed that candidate, so indirectly they were endorsed, but not by personal choice, just by association with the organization is how that played out.
Back to you, Kyle. Same question. People seem to be, crossing the aisle at least a little bit. Do you think that they should for Orman?
Absolutely, I do. I mean, the fact that 70 former members of the Kansas legislature have endorsed Greg Orman in his campaign against Senator Pat Roberts shows that Kansans really want change in how Washington is run. They see that Pat Roberts has been there for over 3 decades, and they see that there is a need for change and some new ideas and new positions to be brought in.
Now, Kyle, back to you again. Roberts has served in the Senate for almost 18 years. Why should Kansas vote for a candidate like Greg Orman, who really has never held a position?
Well, the benefit of bringing in somebody who hasn't held a position before is the fact that they are not necessarily beholden to special interests in Washington. Pat Roberts has served in Congress or in the Senate since 1981, and it's time that some new ideas are brought into the Senate. Pat Roberts has had his time, and what is really there to show for it? We have an outstanding current federal deficit and debt, and job creation is the #1 issue here, and Pat Roberts, at his current juncture, doesn't have a lot to show for it.
Laura, do you think that Kansans really need someone with a lot of experience like Roberts in office right now?
At this point, with the House and the Senate and the situation that it is, I think it's incredibly important to have an experienced representative. With a presidential election coming up, I think it's, too many new faces would be a sticky situation, and so I think having an experienced person.
Well, thank you very much, Laura. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thank you.
John and Morgan, back to you guys.